First of all, welcome for all of you who have come to our second public meeting on Creekwalk restoration. Please, if you are willing to do so, put on your webcam. It's all right if you wish to remain incognito. And also feel free to use the chat box to communicate. And we will go forward. Just a reminder that the Syracuse Parks Department and Onondaga Earth Corps we're the program partners driving the change that's happening at the Creekwalk. And we're working with Restoration Environmental Services, CC Environment. Did I get that right, Lauren? They're helping us both. They're helping us with both the public process and the design consulting. And the reason I got their name wrong is they were Applied Ecological until like a month ago or something.
Right.
Of course, this is funded through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Department of Environmental Conservation through mitigation funds provided as part of Onondaga Lake cleanup. Today, just a quick review of the agenda. I'll talk a little bit about the goals now. And then Onondaga Earth Corps will talk about the public meeting, the outreach they've done to date, and some of the feedback they've gotten. RES and CC Environment will go through the design elements, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the management process. That'll be about half the time. The remaining half of the time will be open forum to answer people's questions. So just in terms of what the goals are here, first of all, we're talking today about Kirk Park, particularly the east side, where we removed a lot of trees in March. It's kind of a blank slate. And if we took no action, a wild forest with no views for the first 10 feet, and eventually trees down the road will take over. The earth without us wants to be forest in this part of the country. And so our goal is a forested riparian buffer, but one that we want to control the trajectory by putting the plants in the ground and managing the views where people desire them. And just to make a note that our next meeting will be June 23rd. This is a Wednesday. It'll be 6:30. It'll be at the Old Oxford Inn, the corner of Bellevue and Midland. And our goal at this meeting is to really drive attendance. We're starting now, and we're going to have a lot of individual conversations, get a lot of people there. We want to walk along parts of the 400 block of Midland, and then the large park that is bounded by Midland, Martin Luther King, and South Ave. That's a big area. And those are two of the areas that'll be the most impacted by the work we do. And so it's important we get feedback from people. There'll be more information about that as time goes on. With that, I will turn it over to Kat Corbett to talk about the nature of the outreach that we've done to date.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. So Onondaga Earth Corps is involved in the the invasive species removal and restoration planting work and maintenance for this project. Also involved in the community outreach aspect. And so we've been doing door-to-door outreach with our crew, our young adult crew and our youth crew. This year we have hit 275 houses total. We've had about 34% direct contact. That means people answered their door and we got to speak with them in person. And then 65% indirect contact, meaning that nobody answered the door and we left an informational flyer about the restoration work that's going on. and about these community meetings, inviting them to the community meetings. You can go to the next slide. We also hosted an in-person meeting last month on April 20th at Kirk Park in order to gain some feedback, gain community members' preferences regarding the work that we're doing in order to understand what people want in the way of, mostly in the way of the restoration planting that we're doing in Kirk Park. And so some of the main takeaways from this meeting were basically that some views to the creek itself were extremely important. They liked how open it is after all the invasive species were removed. So maintaining some of those views into the creek itself and to the other side of the park were identified. You can go to the next slide. So here's an image of an example. We're on the east side of Kirk Park, looking over at the west side of the proposed boat launch. So that concrete pad will become a boat launch in the future. So community members really felt that this view in particular was extremely important to leave open so that if you're on either side of the park, you can see and feel connected to the other side. And they also identified they wanted a bench on that side of the park. Some of the community member quotes, we've interacted with a lot of people just utilizing the Creekwalk itself, going by on bike or walking. Yeah, one guy was so exuberant and he was like, "This is the best thing that's happened in my neighborhood last fall." We didn't catch his name, but he's like, you know, he was just so excited. Another person said, "This spring, why didn't this happen 20 years ago?" And then Twiggy, go back one. Thank you. Oh, you could go forward one more. Twiggy Bailu said, "With the Creekwalk on the west side it now feels like part of Kirk Park, especially when you see the other side." So they love that connection now that you can see the west side of Kirk Park. So that's some of the feedback that we received. Also, our youth crew that's currently working with us is also very excited. They were excited to learn about the project. Many of them are new, and they're really interested in sharing this information when they went door to door yesterday. So Steve, I'll hand it back off to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was quick on the trigger there. As Lauren shares the design concepts that we're proposing based on the feedback, I wanted you to think about, have these things in mind. First of all, as I said before, this area just trees left alone. 2 times this area has been cleared since the 80s, and well, it was cleared in the 80s. There was a forest there in the 80s and cleared again in the 80s, and what we inherited now follows that clearing. So that's the natural order of things there. And so we do want to have trees there because forested riparian buffers are the highest and best use for ensuring water quality along water corridors. And right now there's just a smattering of trees, and we are going to plant a lot of trees, and they're going to change over time. They're going to grow, the views are going to change. And so our goal is to understand where views are important and actively manage those. This grant goes for 5 years. The goal is, can you do that time? what we do hope is that the plants that we will plant intensely now, that those plants will provide a new seed source, a competitive seed source for all the seeds that will blow in and get dropped in by birds. Our goal is to be ever present in this program. This is a beautiful spot on the Creekwalk. It could be a premier spot, and we hope that how we manage the landscape will help it be so. Okay. So, Lauren, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So Lauren Jennison, the landscape architect on this project, and then with me is Ben Zimmerman, our project manager and lead ecologist. We're also working with CC Environment with Sheila and Katie, who are also ecologists, but will join us at a different meeting. So I just want to, if everyone could orient themselves, if we all know Travelers Rest, let's say we're standing, or actually let's think of the kayak launch and the canoe launch that Kat just provided an image of. So if we're standing on that concrete pad and looking north towards Travelers Rest, right now we are focusing on this right side where it says riparian zone, just right of Onondaga Creek. So from the creek up, and then there's the new fence that's been installed. And beyond that fence is what we would call upland. But for this meeting especially, and the outreach that we've been working toward is focusing on the riparian zone on the east side, where Kirk Park is oriented. So next slide, please. And then here you have our previous concept for section 5. And again, just to give you a better idea of the area, we're focusing on the right side of Onondaga Creek along that Kirk Park Drive. So real basic, we've color coded everything, and the feedback that we've gained so far is view sheds are critical, right? And the red areas are your main view sheds. This is where these 4 circles indicate the some of the highest view shed priorities on this east side that will be expanding and installing. There are also 4 gates, and one of those gate openings was shown in Kat's photo just across from the canoe kayak launch. We will also be keeping those gate areas very open as well for easy access for maintenance crews to get in and out of. So how are we going to do that, right? So the picture in the center, the north, so the top picture in the center here gives you an idea of what this area could look like in 10 to 30 years. So you have some of your understory species, shrubs or shrub species, and then your higher shade tree canopy species in this section. What we want to provide in those red areas is an opening. So then how would we do that? We would do it by choosing specific low growth plants. And then the photo on the bottom here is grow low sumac. That will probably be one of our main plants that we'll use just because it is so low. It does form this green carpet and then has a fire red fall color, very pretty. It can become a little bit of an intense plant, especially as maintenance crews try to go in and out of it as they're maintaining that section of the riparian zone. But for the purposes of this restoration, and because we're planting so heavily, this plant is going to be kind of our bread and butter. Other species that we're looking at that are fairly low are your bush honeysuckle. That's your native honeysuckle. Can grow just beyond the knee. And then winterberry, closer to Onondaga Creek, has a really nice red berry in the winter, such as the name replies. Chokeberry, then also looking at spice bush on the fringes of those view sheds and additional ornamental plants on the fringes again. And then we'll get into more of the riparian canopy species in those orange areas that you see here on the map to the right. Also, in our last public meetings, we did gain feedback of adding in kind of food source plants, and some of the tree species that we've been looking at and that will go into this area are hazelnut, so American hazelnut, it's a large shrub, hickory, mainly bitternut hickory, persimmon, and oak, just to name a few. And then another one would be elderberry. Chokeberry also has a nice berry for birds, and serviceberry. So lots of berry trees and nut harvesting trees as well that we will be installing or propose to install in this area. And then what we'd like to gain into the open forum is your feedback on, especially on these view sheds, what you'd like to see in this east side of the riparian zone. If there are additional view sheds that you think should be implemented in this, we'd love to discuss that in open forum. But Steve, you can take it to the next slide. And then here you can see in the photo to the left, that is one of the gate openings. And just downstream of that is the kayak canoe launch. So these are conditions existing as is after the restoration that took place. So the area was, the large invasive or weedy trees were taken down and the area was brushed. So we have this amazing clean slate that we can work with. And our method of madness for this restoration is to plant tightly. And the picture to the right kind of shows you what that method looks like. And you can also see it in the existing condition photo beyond Onondaga Creek, where you have the, it's white PVC deer guard. Those are tree saplings. So similar to what you'd see in the picture to the right. So planting tightly, we have a lot of invasive species and weedy species that will come in. One, because the soil has been disturbed, and two, because you have this new light penetration. So everything's going to want to grow in this area. So our first method in this restoration effort is to plant tightly, as we've mentioned, and plant the right species. And next slide. And then I am just going to touch briefly on this first picture to the left. This is kind of your second to third year of what the seedlings would look like. Again, you have your canopy trees that are a bit straighter growing up towards the sun, and some of your understory or ornamental trees and shrubs start to limb out. And then I will let Ben take over just to talk a little bit about the remainder of the riparian zone succession and what that could look like and what it entails.
Sure, thanks, Lauren. So something that we haven't discussed yet is kind of the ground layer of vegetation. Yes, absolutely. The woody vegetation is going to come back. This area is going to want to transition into shrubs and trees. But along with that, it's going to be certainly herbaceous vegetation, that being non-woody, that will need to be considered as well. So we are taking that into account here, and where appropriate, where there's open soil, introducing other plant species to be competitive with invasives and weeds that we don't want to establish on the site. But over time, the site is going to go through a process of succession, which is the natural progression that we've been talking about of growth. And so this is a really good slide of, this is two different sites, but the left photo is, the second year of growth on a site. And then this picture on the right is kind of in that 5 to 10 year stage. It's a different site, but it's still in central New York. So very representative, but you can see, you know, the shrubs are maybe chest high or so, and some of the trees are, you know, approaching 8-10 feet tall. So that's a good picture and snapshot of the difference in how things will progress. And of course, the ground layer you can see is fully vegetated there in that photo. So as this process occurs, Steve alluded to, you know, managing species that we don't want and allowing things that we do want to continue to thrive. And I think maybe that's a good transition to your next slide, Lauren, if I'm thinking correctly. Okay, maybe it's 2 slides down. Do you want to lead this one off?
Oh, sure. So this again is kind of going into that 10th year. From the previous photos, you had like 2 to 3 and 5 years of growth. You can see here with those 10 years and then the 20th year, these are oaks that were planted as seedlings, and so they've matured quite a bit, yet are still not that ideal canopy tree, right, that we think of when we look at woodlands. But these are doing quite nicely, and you still have a lot of view shed involved in between each tree. The thing here, again, is also taking care of the ground plane vegetation, making sure that the maintenance on that is continually treated. And one thing that, again, the purpose of kind of our tight plant spacing is to control that vegetation. So you would have your shrubs start to grow a bit taller, and then your trees reaching up to the sky. We can go into the next slide. Next slide. That's backwards.
I'm going back.
Oh, there, this is great. Yeah. And then to what we want to happen versus what could happen, you know, what we're trying to avoid, right? So this photo on the left are maple seedlings, and this is actually red maple. And I think Ben could speak to this area more than I can. It is in New York.
Yeah.
But what would happen, this is something that similar that could happen, especially with the trees that were taken down in this riparian zone. We had a ton of Norway maple, which is highly invasive, and maples themselves, you know, drop profuse seedlings yearly, and then shade out pretty quickly compared to the other species. But Ben, I'll just let you speak to this photo of what could happen and why we're choosing specific species over others.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And before I forget as well, you know, there are previous slides too, you know, you could see in some areas they were left more shrubby, and some of those oaks were more savanna-like. So, you know, that's good examples of some of the different views that you'll have. You know, some areas definitely will have that more dense and be more inclusive of shrubs. But then getting to this slide, right, that unmanaged maple seedling patch is just, it's where the conditions are right. You know, the areas around it were managed, or not managed, I should say, similarly. They were just let go. And, you know, the conditions were right in this location, and we had a flush of maple seedlings. So that just highlights some of the environmental factors that we'll need to consider and adapt to as the project goes on. So, you know, we'll plan this to include certain view sheds, but there may be areas that try to transition very abruptly, like this area, and they'll have to be managed accordingly. So, and that's, you know, the second picture that is here is, you know, more of that savanna kind of canopy, still a nice ground layer of vegetation, but spaced out, mature trees with good view.
And because we're applying more of a holistic approach to the riparian restoration, and again, planting very tightly with shrubs to manage understory growth. Over time, it is still a holistic management approach, like Ben and Steve have commented on. So not all of the saplings will survive in this, and then some of them will be trimmed or will be overshaded as the growth occurs. So what I'm trying to say is that the riparian zone, because it is this a holistic approach, will, once you have those invasive or weedy species controlled, then the woodland itself would kind of generate its own maintenance. As you have the canopy shade trees shade out the areas, you then have less ground plane growth and less movement of your ornamental species. Next slide. So next steps. The point of all of this is, again, to gain feedback for this specific east side section. And we want to know if we're going in the right direction, if there's additional things we need to add. And then we have a few days to put together our planting plan. And then Kat and her crew will install the seedlings that we've sourced for this area. We're going to have additional public feedback opportunities after the Section 5 riparian zone's completed, and especially in that June 23rd meeting, where we'll be looking at the additional sections, specifically Section 2 and 3, which are highly programmed, some of your more programmed areas. Coming back to Section 5, we are going to be looking at Traveler's Rest. So some native landscaping and additional shrub and tree plantings around that area, and hoping to implement that in the fall. And then we'll continue development of the planting plans for the additional sections as we move forward. Next slide. So with that, we'll open it up to our open forum so anyone can unmute themselves, turn on your webcam if it's not on, and let us know your thoughts. I guess I'll start out with asking a question for the group. Are there additional view sheds that we have not targeted or gained insight of that we should be paying attention to?
My interest mainly revolves around the use of evergreens and conifers, if possible, in the areas, just to strengthen the that kind of shaded and all-season foliage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are looking at a few evergreen species, especially cedars, in the upland areas, mainly around the Traveler's Rest area. But we could look at that inside the riparian zone.
Great, thank you.
Because of that all-season texture and form, though, I think that's something we would definitely keep that outside of view sheds, in those orange areas, mainly maybe north or south of Section 5. Then Denise, did you have anything to add?
I actually just came in on it. I apologize for being late, but better late than never, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in and catch up on what I missed. That's what I was hoping to do. But I thought I'd reach out to Kat later on. I know she'll tell me.
Just for people that did come in late, I will move it to the, oh wait, I passed it. I'll move it to the proposed design. Here we go. I didn't see it because of all the photos of people, the gallery of photos, but just to recalibrate people that came in late. Actually, Lauren, if you could give the breezy tour again of what the
Sure.
color coding means, that'd be great.
Yeah. So from South Avenue to Colvin is on the east side, right along Park Drive, is the riparian zone that we're focusing on for this this meeting and where our outreach has focused. And the basically the entire site's been cleared with a few shade trees and some understory species as well. But what we've heard from the community is that, you know, this has opened up a new experience. And there are quite a few view sheds that are highly important and people would want to keep them open. And 4 of those view sheds are highlighted with the orange or green circles. And the proposed view sheds are also color coordinated with this red color. So here you've got the pedestrian bridge, and on either side you have red. So those would be your low grow shrubs to keep that eye level view of the other side of the creek. And then your orange areas here would be your traditional riparian shade tree plants or planting plan scenario, where you have right now we're going to be planting 8 feet apart, just because of kind of the maintenance involved in this area, and providing, lack for a better word, less incentive for weedy species to grow. The purple areas are mainly ornamental planting areas. These could definitely change, especially from feedback we've gained. You know, maybe these ornamental species, understory species, so that's mainly your flowering, small trees and shrubs could be intermixed into the riparian zone, but we have designed them to be on the edges of those low growth view sheds. So something we could also think about moving. And then the upland areas we will also be focusing on later on in this project are in green. One area we'll look at this fall, or hoping to plant this fall, is Traveler's Rest. And the Traveler's Rest area is kind of in the center there, so that where it says Kirk, you have the green circle, and then to the left of that, there's a gray square that is Traveler's Rest. And then the canoe and kayak launch is just to the left. It's actually shaded out by the green circle, but that last green circle to the south, closest to Colvin, is where that launch is.
Lauren,
so-
there's hand raised. If you want to take that, Brad.
Yeah, I was wondering, for the planting of all this stuff, do you guys need help with that? Are you looking for volunteers, or is that something that's already been arranged?
I'll take that on. Yeah, our intent is to have volunteer projects to help both get plants in the ground and to help manage them. We'll be thinking about towards the fall. And I suppose I should let Earth Corps say something about that, since they'll be important participants in the organization, but basic answer is yes.
Okay, yeah, I'd be looking to help out with that personally, and maybe recruiting some people to help. So if I can get on some kind of list, that'd be great.
Okay.
That reminds me that for everybody that is on here, I see almost everybody's named. If people just joined and didn't enter their email, it'll be good to have that in the chat so that we can make sure we can reach everybody.
And
Um,
I
Steve,
have a
on that?
question. This is Twiggy.
Hey, Twiggy.
Hey, how is everyone? So I didn't know what riparian trees and shrubs look like, so I did some, as I normally do, my research or whatnot. And these are very bushy trees that sometimes, and shrubs that seem to grow out big and sometimes fill in areas like woody trees that are sometimes planted in mountainous areas around trails. So I'm wondering, with what we are able to see now, what would, I'm just not seeing how we would be able to see through, even with the 8 feet apart, with the way that some of these shrubs and trees grow, especially like box elder and some of those things. I'm not sure what you're planning. But I'm just trying to figure that out because we had a lot of overgrowth. And we just want to maintain being able to see, you know, that curb appeal that I was telling you about, Steve, being still able to see into the park, see the skyline where the dome is, that we can see from our homes, but not. I'm on the other side of Kirk Park, Rockland and Hunt. And a lot of stuff got put in that wasn't what we asked for. So now we have a chance to ask for some things, and I'm just trying to figure out how do we avoid these big woody, boxy looking shrubs and trees if they are of the riparian variety.
I'll take that on. The thing that will have the most dramatic impact on views is anything growing in the first 8 to 12 feet. So you can see the areas that we put in red are going to be our primary focus for maintaining low view sheds. Our goal in the orange areas is predominantly trees that we will thin over time. I don't know if you were here when there was a slide that shows this condition here on the left, where it's this thick wall of trees. We have this challenge where it's going to be difficult to manage this without letting the shade of the plants do some work for us. And the shade of the trees is going to help suppress a lot of understory growth so that we can end up like the slide on the right. Along the way, we're going to have to do physical management of the areas in red most aggressively, and selective thinning in the areas in orange as it transitions from the picture on the left to the right. There's just, you know, to get the overstory shade, but to keep the views, it's going to be dynamic and require us to get in there and cultivate what we want and what we don't want. It'll never be a steady state. So in the places where it's red, Lauren talked about planting low grow shrubs that have mature heights at 3 feet, but will range from 1 to 3 feet. And plant them densely so they crowd out other things. How did I do on answering your comments?
Steve, this is Greg. Can I add?
Please.
Lauren, would you mind pulling up that slide with the low grow sumac? So Twiggy, the kind of the idea of the areas where the green circles are on the map right here is to plant densely with vegetation, like you'll see on in the middle of the screen to the bottom there, where this is one species that kind of colonizes and dominates and doesn't grow much higher than, you know, 2 to 3 feet. So in these areas where the view sheds have been identified, and Twiggy, if you have a view shed from, the west side to the dome that you mentioned, that's the kind of feedback that would be good to have now, because we can have these lower understory plants that don't grow to the 6 to 8 to 12 feet, where we want to keep these views open.
What is the name of the plant, Greg?
It's low growth sumac. I know you're a fan of a lot of the green infrastructure sites that are out there, but it's a plant that's been used at a lot of the green infrastructure sites with Save the Rain. So if you want to go look at some of those, Earth Corps would be happy to go and show some of the sites that have that. But
I'm just trying to figure out if it's a small, medium, or large shrub that if you all don't maintain, it will overgrow and block our view again. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Grollo.
Come on, Denise, where you at?
It's actually
Here I am.
it's a cultivar. Like Greg mentioned, it only grows 2 to 3 feet high, if that. And what it does, it actually acts as a green carpet. So it's extremely low. And that would be kind of our bread and butter shrub that we'd use in those specific view shed areas where the green circles are. And then we'd have some a few other low growing shrubs as well to fill in that area. But Grollo sumac, it really does act like a carpet. And then like it looks like in that photo. And then in the fall, it has a really pretty bright red color.
That's good to know, Lauren, because I love the carpet look, and then to be able to see at the same time. So, yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, they planted the low grow in a huge section by Armory Square in the riparian zone, and it's doing really well. There's not a lot of growth or weeds coming up through it. So that's good.
So Twiggy, there might be a box elder. There might be a box elder or a mulberry or a black locust that pops up through there, but you can let us know and we'll go out and snip those.
We don't want any box elders, sorry. I can give you a list of what we don't want. But no, I'm familiar with sumac, and when Greg said rain gardens, I know exactly the plant that you're talking about, which is a beloved plant. So that would be, that's fine. I just didn't know what the planting plan was. So that's why I had those questions. We just can't have anything that bushes out anymore and takes over.
Right. Yep. I'm looking forward to the vision being really, really open. Really open.
And also, Greg and Steve, I mentioned to both of you all, when it rains, we get some soil movement over here. I guess you guys called it the boat launch, or what'd you call it, Steve? The canoe launch. We call it the view pad over by Rockland and Hunt. So we need something to stabilize that soil in between the pad and the Creekwalk.
Yeah, we definitely. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've mentioned it to the mayor and others, but grass alone isn't enough, it seems like, because of the runoff still coming from the little side of where the Creekwalk is. That's a downward slope going to that pad, so it's still some runoff.
Yeah, we definitely, so that is a part of our planting plan, not specifically for this, the East riparian zone, but we will be implementing native landscaping. So that'll be your native trees. We do propose to use a lot of Grollo sumac in that area. Also native rose, which is really pretty, grasses, and then your native perennials. So it will be a stormwater runoff filtration system, but also deplete any kind of erosion that may occur in those high rain event situations. And will also attract some of your more visually pleasing butterfly and bird species.
It's not even the high rain, it's the low rain where you are in a flood zone. So if you, with the houses there are in the flood zone. So even though we don't flood, it's been, you know, captured as the flood zone. So even small amounts, because it's been disturbed now, it doesn't take that much to wash away the soil.
Yeah, I mean, we are working with really steep slopes, and yes, grass alone will not impede erosion. So we definitely will be looking into that and applying appropriate plant material for any erosion deterrence. Saying that, we will have some erosion on that east side just in the beginning, but Kat and her team have been hydro seeding, so you'll have quick growth that will impede that erosion. And then as soon as the seedlings are installed, that, you know, those species are going to be very hungry, very thirsty, so that will definitely help as well.
Yeah, that's something we didn't mention before. On the east side where we put the new fence, but also on the west side, same, which is from the fence down the slope about 4 feet on either side, different wildflower seed mixes would put in, and those are grasses that are just low. They're like 2 feet high. They have pollinator plants, and their goal is, besides just to cover the bare soil and prevent erosion, provide some habitat and also provide some competition from unwanteds getting established.
Twiggy, just a quick question. I know you've been active with the Rockland Bissell Street neighborhood group. Do you think there would be interest in kind of working on a project together there that, you know, alleviated some of that erosion? You don't have to answer now, but, you know, that's something that we would be interested in setting up if there were interest.
He said I didn't have to answer, so I just shook my head, y'all.
Well, if you want to, you can.
Definitely, Greg. It just
Okay.
doesn't have to be Rockland and Bissell either. Denise is on the other end of where I live at. So and she's also Kirk Park too. So her involvement, I can get the Kirbys involved and some of the people going on down, because again, what's connected to that is where you all, as I told Steve, Steve told me about a tree protection team. So I'm very glad I got to talk to him and hear about that, because as you know, going on down Onondaga Creek Parkway are all those other trees that you replace. So they still have a need to want to know how to take care of those, as well as how do they get some street trees too. So I think you could do both and with that.
Sure.
Absolutely. You will reach out separately, but both to you and Denise, and we can figure out kind of timing and seasonality and all that good stuff.
You guys, if you don't know me, you'll know me after this. So Greg, a great bargain, Cat, I see you on here too, right? Would be if you guys could assign Earth Corps to the Rockland Ave Garden. I know I could get some people out to help you with a project.
You got it.
It seems like we caught up pretty well, but I was going to say that, is this recording going to be made available? I assume yes, but for anyone who missed and would want to review.
Yeah. We will need to post it.
Yeah, we will put up the recording onto the Onondaga Earth Corps YouTube channel, along with the other Creekwalk videos that were uploaded before as well. So we can follow up with folks. If you didn't register and joined without registering, just remember to put your email into the chat, and then we can make sure that you guys are notified when that's up.
Thank you, Ben. before we wrap up, I see Julius on and Kathy, and if any others, Terrence, if you guys have questions or comments before we wrap up, we'd love to hear them.
No question at this time. I just came in late, so I'm just listening right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Julius. We'll send out the link. So if you want to catch the front part and you have questions or concerns, we'd love to hear them.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, there was one question posed in the chat box by Joshua. If we could incorporate large stones or boulders in some of these areas as kind of an ornamental feature, as has been done in other areas. And although stone is not in this particular budget, there are definitely areas that we could identify where those could be implemented. They would look beautiful along this entire stretch of Section 5 along the trail, especially. So we could definitely identify those areas, and then in the future, as funding becomes available, maybe that could be implemented. But we are
Before you make any decisions, can you make sure that they're not in a place where our kids can jump on them on a slippery rock and fall? I was shaking my head no, because we need to just be careful that it's right by Kirk Park. It's right on the other side of Onondaga Park where kids are walking through, and we already need to make sure that they don't get past that gate, and just make sure that whatever you put in is not big enough for a kid to hurt themselves on. Not against stone or rock. I'm against big stone and rock where our kids could try to play Superman and bust their head open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I didn't mean to add stone in the riparian zone. So within that inner corridor of the gates, the slopes are just too steep for those to really stabilize and be of any value. So I was thinking more in the upland areas or that park setting, but great comment. We definitely keep safety involved. Any kind of boulder, I think, would be more of a landscape boulder too, less of a climbing structure that would be ideal for a child. I have a child myself who's a climber, so I feel your pain.
I learned from our planner in charge of playgrounds that there's a maximum height that they have for jumping structures, and I think it's around 30 inches.
Yeah.
Something like that they don't like to go above for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and landscape boulders is just thinking of those, soft round boulders, 24 inches, so 2 feet, and half of that would be embedded in the ground. So then it really becomes a foot to a foot.
Just know that we live close to Elmwood Park, and those are very sharp pieces if we're not careful. Even landscape boulders can become dangerous. So that's all I'm saying. I like the measurements that Steve gave, but I'm just saying kids find unique ways. That you have a climber, I have a climber. They climb on things that you would never expect them to climb on.
Very true.
Noted.
Noted. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other comments, feedback, again, Steve, if you could jump to the last slide. We've
Sure.
got, we'll post the video will become available to everyone. And then my email and Ben's email are here in case you have additional feedback for us or photos that you'd like to share with us, especially viewsheds that are important to you and you want to keep open. So thank you everyone for participating, and we look forward to implementing this planting plan shortly. And then stay tuned for the June 23rd virtual and in-person walkabout at Oxford Inn. So thank you.